I did not join the Marine Corps. I became a Marine. There is a difference. A person can join an organization. A person can sign papers. A person can be issued orders, uniforms, boots, and a serial number. But becoming a Marine changes where the burden lives. It enters the body. It enters the memory. It enters the way you stand in a room, the way you hear distress, the way you carry the dead, the way you remain faithful even when faithfulness is no longer convenient to the country that asked it of you. I went in as a young man whose test scores said construction draftsman. That was the plan. The Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery said I should become someone who drew structures, who read lines, who measured, who built from design. And somehow, in the infinite wisdom of the military, that road bent. Fort Belvoir became Camp Lejeune. Drafting tools became kitchen tools, and I became an E3 sharpshooter in an apron. That sounds almost funny. A Marine with a rifle qualification badge and a serving spoon. A sharpshooter who could make an omelette. A young man trained to look through a scope and imagine faces, then sent into the mess to feed the men who might be going out toward their last days. But I remember the pride of it. I remember standing there in that mess hall, making food with discipline, with speed, with care. I remember handing an omelette to a Marine and knowing that I was not just serving breakfast. I was serving strength. I was serving one more good thing before whatever came next. I remember filling a baby bottle for a family and feeling that through hospitality I was still serving the Corps. I remember the field, the sanitation buckets, the systems, the preparation, making sure the troops could be fed, could be cared for, could trust that someone had thought through the details before hunger, exhaustion, heat, rain, or chaos arrived. That was my post. That was my service. I was not less a Marine because I wore an apron. I was a Marine because I was faithful to the task in front of me. And then, years later, came the knowledge. Around 1987, when I was still only about 23 years old, I was contacted and told, in effect, that my days would likely end early. Slowly, painfully. That what had moved through that base, through the water, through the pipes, through the showers, through the kitchens, through the bodies of Marines and families might one day come due. And I carried that. For decades I carried that. Not as a public cause, not as a slogan, as a private gnawing. A knowledge underneath the life. A shadow behind the meals I remembered being proud to serve. Because I had not merely been stationed at Camp Lejeune. I had fed there. I had showered there. I had swum there. I had served food there. I had helped care for Marines and families there. And somewhere inside that memory was a sentence I could not easily say, I may have served cancer to generations of Marines. Do you understand what that does to a person? A Marine is trained to carry burdens. We are trained to do what must be done. We are trained to move underweight. We are trained to laugh darkly when the alternative is breaking. But some burdens do not announce themselves honestly at first. They sit quietly. They wait. They show up years later in the body, in the family, in the son who suffers, in the other son with complications, in the diagnosis, in the question that wakes you in the dark. What did I carry home from that place? And what did I help carry to others without knowing? That is a terrible thing to live beside. And Marines live beside terrible things. People speak of military service as if sacrifice is always clean and visible. It is not. Sometimes sacrifice is a young person being taught to look through a scope, imagine a face, and pull the trigger. You do not have to kill anyone for that to change you. The training itself changes you. The permission changes you. The smile of a country that knows you will carry what it does not want to carry changes you. America smiles at its Marines because it knows someone else will do the looking. Someone else will do the standing. Someone else will do the carrying. Someone else will guard the embassy. Someone else will guard the kettle in the snow. Someone else will answer the call. Someone else will carry the dead, and I have carried them. I have carried the dead I knew. I have carried the dead. I have carried the Marines I fed. I have carried the families who trusted the water. I have carried the knowledge that my country knew more than it admitted and moved slower than faithfulness required. And now I am asking for help. Not pity, not spectacle, not applause. Help. I am Dr. Russell Thomas. I have a PhD. I worked with Microsoft. I led cloud and AI training work at Intel. I have spent my life teaching, designing, building, serving, and helping others orient themselves in changing worlds. But before all of that, and beneath all of that, I am a Marine. An E-3 sharpshooter in an apron, a Camp Lejeune Marine with cancer, and I need help carrying my dead. That is not weakness. That is muster. Because there comes a point when even a Marine has to call the formation. There comes a point when the burden is too heavy to carry in silence. There comes a point when always faithful means telling the truth loudly enough that others can find their place beside you. So I am asking those who have Marine in them to muster on me. And you do not have to wear blues to be a Marine in this sense. You do not have to have stood on yellow footprints. You do not have to know the cadence or the rank structure or the old songs. You have to be faithful, faithful to the wounded, faithful to the caregivers, faithful to the veterans in hospital beds, faithful to the nurses in the hallway, faithful to the EMTs, firefighters, 911 dispatchers, doctors, clerks, aides, public servants, spouses and children who carry what systems often refuse to see. Faithful to the truth that people are not widgets, faithful to the understanding that service leaves residue, faithful enough to know that a nation cannot keep asking human beings to absorb its burdens and then act surprised when those burdens become visible. We carry things. That is what Marines do. But carrying does not mean disappearing. Carrying does not mean silence forever. Carrying does not mean being processed as paperwork until the body gives out. Carrying does not mean the country gets to look away. I served food, I filled bottles, I cleaned systems, I prepared field sanitation, I wore an apron, I qualified as a sharpshooter, I became a Marine. And now, after all these years, I am standing before you with the burden no longer hidden. Not because I want to be seen. Because I need help carrying what should never have been mine alone. Muster on me, not for charity, for faithfulness. Not because I'm finished, because I'm still standing. Not because I stopped being a Marine, because I never did. Always faithful.